Hi everybody, this is Agnes from Nuove Sediment, and today we are going to see whether the smartest bottle from a famous estate is actually the second one, Super Tuscan Edition. Think of Lafite or Chateau Margaux, Sassicaia and Ornellaia. All of these are very expensive, rare bottles often sold on strict allocations. In my previous video, I briefly touched upon what an important role the label or the brand plays in our enjoyment of wine. But of course, we wine lovers cannot always afford such bottles, so how do we get to taste and experience the house style and the quality? Well, in theory, here comes the second wines and third wines, and in some cases even fourth wines. They create a convenient ladder that allows us to experience a famed estate at the price level we feel most comfortable with. And if we return to the argument that brand plays an important role in overall enjoyment of wine, then perhaps a second wine can give us something of the Sassicaia experience without paying the Sassicaia price. But before we taste, let's briefly explore the idea of second wines. The concept is closely associated with Bordeaux and most likely originated there. While many wine critics attribute the development of second wines to the famous consultant Michel Rolland, the truth is that his role was probably overstated. Ensuring the quality of the Grand Vin has always been of the utmost importance. And it is nothing new that grape quality varies significantly, not only amongst purchased fruit, but also within the estate's own vineyards. Therefore, reserving the highest quality fruit for the Grand Vin and selling the rest, or bottling it under a completely different label, has been common practice since at least the 18th century. The modern second label, which actually uses the association and the name of the main estate, really started in 1980s. With this narrative, producers could argue that through rigorous grape selection, only the very best fruit was reserved for the Grand Vin, the fruit that produced the longest and most age-worthy wines. Meanwhile, fruit that did not qualify for the main label but was still of high quality, but perhaps produced more immediately enjoyable wines, went into the second label. By associating that wine with the main brand, the second wine allowed producers to sell it at a significantly higher price point than simply selling the grapes off to négociants. While for consumers, it provided an opportunity to be part of the brand and potentially sneak peek into the quality and style of the Grand Vin. In this unique setup, production of the Grand Vin was often reduced, making it even rarer, potentially increasing its price and thus becoming further out of reach for regular folks like me. And we understand that the same idea of the quality and price continues with the introduction of the third wine. As I mentioned earlier, the concept of second wines originated in Bordeaux, but many other winemaking regions and estates have adapted this practice. And today I am going to focus on Tuscany, specifically Super Tuscans. And when evaluating second wines, I do not think they should be tasted in isolation. They really should be tasted next to their Grand Vin, in this case, Sassicaia and Ornellaia. We are going to find out how close the second wines really come to their Grand Vins, whether they offer better value, and whether they can truly deliver the experience they promise. Shall we? As always, these wines were poured by my cameraman, so I don't know which one is which. And as always, we are going to start with wine number 1. Alright, so as expected, we see quite deep color on the wine 1 because all of them are essentially Bordeaux blends, so either the Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot is the dominant grape variety. And initially, this wine to me seems quite shy and maybe restrained in a way. You know, when you really start to converse with it, you feel slight hint of blackberries and blackcurrant, you know, that cassis element, but there's also some leafy character to it, some graphite element to it as well. But there is that shyness, that restrained character in it. I think it is so interesting. All of these wines are coming from the same vintage, which was quite challenging vintage, and it really required a lot from the producers. You know, we had some rain and we had heat waves. But the first thing that struck me in the first wine was the elevated, that fresh acidity, that vivacity it had on the palate. So that was really beautiful. And the tannin here is done in this really beautiful way. It adds the structure, it adds backbone, it adds the skeletal frame to the wine and to the fruit, but it is not overpowering. There's certain elegance to it. In a way, this wine seems like this quiet wine that hides, you know, certain greatness and certain excitement in it. And upon the second sip, the tannin, it felt more prominent, more chalky on the palate, and it provides quite long-lasting, maybe slightly herbal or, you know, dried herbal character-driven finish. So I will give this wine 92 points. Let's move to wine number 2. All right, so wine number 2, we do have similarly deep color, deep ruby color. On the nose, it is inviting you in a more active way than the wine number 1 did. It seems more open, more generous, more that black fruit driven, like fruit here shines a bit more than here. Here, the wine number 1 was really closed in a sense, while wine number 2, it says here are the black dark ripe plums and black currant and blackberry characters. They are all wrapped in that smoky veil, that toasty element. There's certain element of freshness here, maybe like sage or rosemary, that, you know, green, but that quite aromatic character to it. Let's taste the wine. I would say that another great job is done here because, again, the first sip provided so much energy and that freshness and liveliness on the palate. On my mouth, it also seemed way more generous and open than the wine 1 was. It had all that jolly, ripe blue and black fruit character, but still that tannic frame, it was there, it was quite present, it covered my whole palate, and you could feel like that seriousness of the tannin, like, you know, it was really beautifully done. And together with tannin, together with that acidity, and together with that fruit ripeness, this is what I feel on my palate right now in the aftertaste. So in wine 1, I felt more fruit on the aftertaste, on the finish. In wine 2, it is more like the combination of all those structural elements while also having that fruit. It is like a whole wine that is still sticking to your tongue while I speak to you. I will give this wine 96 points. Let's move to wine number 3. All right, when I was talking about the fruit ripeness, those blue and black fruits in wine 2, I haven't smelled or tasted the wine 3 yet, and now this wine really shows that opulence, that ripeness, that warmth of the fruit that we often associate, you know, with warmer, hotter climates, sunnier climates. And yes, I don't know, maybe these wines 2 and 3 have spent a bit more time in the glass, so they have opened up a bit more. But wine 1, it was so closed. Wine 2 was a bit more open, and then wine 3 seems so generous. It is offering you everything. There is this, you know, generosity and richness of fruit. But still we have a hint of smokiness and toasty characters as well. Now that I have told how open it is, it's decided to close down again. Let's taste it. So wine 3, it is this rich and opulent and very generous and slightly kind of fatty wine style, if I can be honest with you. So we have this, richness of fruit, ripeness of fruit, sweetness of the fruit as well on the palate. And there's this nice, refreshing, elevated acidity that just, lifts the fruit up, because otherwise the fruit is quite rich and filled with juices and sugars and all that sunshine. So it needs that lift. But what I specifically liked in this wine, the lift here, that freshness here, is also provided by the tannin, because tannin is what just filled and covered my whole mouth, my whole palate. So I think it represents a completely different style, and it puzzles me that all of these three wines come from the same vintage, because the wine 1 and 2, they had so much freshness in terms of acidity, but wine 3 shows so much ripeness of the fruit, and the freshness here is achieved through tannin. I quite like this style. I will give this wine 95 points. Let's move to wine number 4. All right, so now, which is interesting, I think my theory is going sideways, because with all the wines, we were going an upward trajectory in the way that they were opening up. Wine 1 was relatively closed and tight for me, at least personally. Then 2 was a bit open, and 3 was this generous beast. Then wine 4 it is not closed or tight in the understanding that I felt with wine 1. It just seems a bit more calm. It seems more ready in a way on the nose. Like the fruit here is not just, fresh and bursting with juices just from the bush, but more, harvested yesterday and maybe crushed a little bit. So there's slight oxidation, maturity to it. And keep in mind, all of these 4 wines come from the same vintage. Yeah, this wine on the nose feels like a slightly laid back guy, like, I'm ready. Talk with me. Let's taste it. Wow, and once again, the acidity strikes. The first sip, that freshness, majority of these wines offered, I'm really surprised. I'm very impressed what the winemakers have done here, because within such a, hot, maybe not extremely hot, because every year becomes hotter and hotter than the previous year. Like every year we keep breaking records. So maybe today in 2026, 2023 does not seem as hot anymore, but still it was warm, sunny vintage. And to be able to preserve that freshness, that, juiciness, that vivacity, that energy in these wines, I am really, really impressed. This is what I like in these wines quite a lot. And while I speak to you, the acidity is what, still stays here on my palate. I really enjoy the acidity here. In a way, wine 4 is this trickster, because on the nose it felt, this really laid back and ready and maybe a bit more mature in a way. Then on the palate, that freshness kicked in, that energy, and you taste it and you just know it is a youngster, it is fresh and youngish and, ready to play. So I really liked this character as well. I will give this wine 93 points. Shall we reveal the wines? All right, we will reveal the wines in the order that I tasted them. So we will start with wine number 1. So we are in La Sierra Nuova dell'Ornellaia, Bolgheri Rosso 2023. So this is the second wine of Ornellaia. The one thing I didn't mention in the beginning, with Bordeaux wines, I think that the price difference with the Grand One and the second wine is not always as high. Like, for example, Chateau Latour, you would get for 500, 600, maybe 700 euros. And then La Force de Latour, which is the second wine, it is still quite expensive. It would be like 200, 300 euros. Then with La Sierra Nova, it is 50, 60 euros. So when it comes to really enjoying the second labels of Super Tuscans, in a way, they are more affordable than the second wines of famed Bordeaux estates. Of course, the original price for Ornellaia is also much lower, so they cannot expect to sell, the second wine at the same price. But still, I think they offer very good value for fine wine category, and also this introduction within the Super Tuscan world. Let's move to wine number 2, which I gave 96 points, which was the highest scored wine amongst these 4. I know the star. It is the Sassicaia 2023. To be honest, there were few critics who gave much higher points to this wine. I think James Suckling gave it 99, and maybe it was Wine Spectator or Wine Advocate who gave it 100. So I gave 96. I still think it was beautiful wine. It was this really generous and inviting, but at the same time, there was a lot of freshness packed in it. Beautiful, beautiful example. Let's move to wine number 3, because now we have Grand Vin Sassicaia and we have the second wine from Ornellaia. So one of these two should be Ornellaia. And it is 2023 Bolgheri Ornellaia Grand Vin, 14.5% alcohol. I think for me, this was one of the most interesting part in this tasting, because you read about the stylistic differences of these two Grand Vins, Sassicaia and Ornellaia. And rarely, of course, do we ever experience the stylistic difference, in the glass, because expensive wines, of course. And here today, for me, for my understanding, for my education, it was gem to see, the freshness, the liveliness, the vivacity here in Sassicaia, and the richness and the opulence and the ripeness of fruit, almost sweet character fruit in this Ornellaia. So I thought, in my mind, when I was tasting this wine, that this could be Ornellaia. And it is so nice to see that stylistic character that you expect, that you are reading about, you do actually see in the glass. So this was beautiful experience for me. I wish you could taste them with me and tell your, thoughts on it as well. But yeah, wow. Let's move to the wine number 4, which we already know what it is. And I gave it 93 points. Guidalberto, Tenuta San Guido. So this is the second wine of Sassicaia. And you know what I just realized, what is really, really interesting here today is that in a way, we saw the stylistic preference for me, because the highest scored Grand Vin for me was Sassicaia, and the highest scored second label was Guidalberto. So that probably tells something me about my own taste. So that means that maybe I like more, Cabernet-based wines that have more freshness, more acidity in a way, because Ornellaia was a bit richer and riper in style. But still, it is a stretch, because I rated all of these wines super high. They are premium, top wines, amazing quality wines. And I do feel like the Guidalberto really represented the philosophy and the idea of Sassicaia. I think stylistically, La Sierra Nuova dell'Ornellaia, it was not as rich and not as opulent, like the Ornellaia itself. So there was bigger difference within these wines, although the quality still stands high. Then Guidalberto definitely has, more of that Sassicaia signature, if you will. So to conclude this little experiment of ours, I think it really depends of the producer. You know, first of all, what they decide to do and how they decide to present their second labels. Do they want it to be like the mini Sassicaia, mini Ornellaia, or do they want it to be, you know, completely different wine style that you maybe enjoy a bit earlier, that you enjoy while your Ornellaia or your Sassicaia is on hold in your cellars? Or do you want it to make, you know, that introduction within the style and for the consumer slowly convert and try to taste the Grand One itself? Yeah. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please let me know, what are your thoughts on second wines? Do you explore the second wines or third wines or fourth wines? Or maybe you think it is, you know, just slightly not as exciting or not as interesting for you. And let me know in the comment section below which second wines I should really seek out, and should I make the Edition Bordeaux. But meanwhile, make sure to watch this video next.